Hello, everyone. Today's episode is all about financial operations, or FinOps. We are going to introduce the concept of the FinOps framework and dive into how the different domains and capabilities defined by the framework translate back to AKS in a Kubernetes-centric experience. Welcome back to the AKS Community YouTube channel. On the channel today, we have a very exciting guest, Michael. He is a principal PM here at Microsoft and a key member of the FinOps Foundation. So welcome, Michael. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
To get started, can you give a little bit of background on what is the FinOps Foundation, kind of what is your role within the foundation, and how does the FinOps framework play a picture?
Yeah, so let's see. The FinOps Foundation is an organization that was kind of born out of the FinOps community a few years back, I want to say in 2019 maybe. And it's really there just to help the development of best practices in the FinOps space, trying to bring together all the knowledge that exists in the community to kind of formalize that and share that knowledge out with others and help the evolution of FinOps practitioners in the industry to help them learn and grow, to understand what they need to do, network together, and just kind of build out their experience. And like I said, just kind of formalize a lot of the things that people are already doing in a way that just kind of helps the community at large grow together.
That's awesome. And it's really nice to see how the framework is all encompassing. You know, it touches on principles, different personas involved in the FinOps life cycle, and then it carves out very specific domains that are actionable and tied to specific scenarios at the cloud level, and then also translating to the Kubernetes specific level. So let's take a look at that. Let's see what that looks like.
And there's a lot of assets that the FinOps Foundation works with the community to produce. So they have a lot of docs to kind of have give people like hyper-focused ideas on things that they can go do within the FinOps space. But the FinOps framework is really that one thing that everything just builds on top of and extends. It's that framework that everybody can kind of rely on. So if we look at the FinOps framework, what we'll see is we'll have a core set of principles for what it means to implement FinOps. I don't want to spend too much time on these, but they're pretty common things that you'll see because one thing to understand about FinOps is not just about managing and optimizing cost. Actually, one of my favorite things is JR, the executive director of the FinOps Foundation. He likes to say that FinOps is not about saving money. FinOps is about making money. And that's one big difference between FinOps and some traditional cost management practices you've seen in the past. Because it's not just about reducing what you spend in the cloud. It's about finding out where do you get the most value out of the cloud and investing more in that. You definitely need to optimize as part of that. But the key thing is, where are you getting that value? Because if you focus on where you're spending the most money and reducing that, you might actually be lowering the value you get out of the cloud. And so the principles are just kind of supporting this. Teams need to collaborate. It's just about getting these cross-functional teams. You need it's about these different personas, right? Getting them together. You got engineering, of course. FinOps practitioners are supporting the engineering teams. You've got finance, leadership, procurement, product teams. You need to get these teams, these people to collaborate in order to work together efficiently. Business value drives technology decisions. Again, this goes back to everything revolves around business value. I won't go through each one of these, but these are the kind of the core principles that drive how you act and how you work in the FinOps space. And then we've got their core personas, which are just the different teams across the organization that will be interacting within your FinOps practice. The allied personas, these are some overlapping areas that play a big role in FinOps, but aren't necessarily some of those core teams that are doing a lot of the work across the FinOps capabilities. And then if we look at the domains and capabilities in the bottom, what you'll see is understand is all about just that domain is all about understanding what it is that you're doing in the cloud, understanding the cost and the usage that is being incurred there, quantifying business value. That goes back to that value tenant that I mentioned. Optimize is, as it sounds, it's all about driving efficiency in what you're doing to make sure that you're getting the most out of that. And then manage the FinOps practice. That's really just about how you do that job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is particularly interesting. I think what you called out on, teams really need to collaborate across all of these capabilities and scenarios. And in the context of AKS, they're typically the platform teams, which are managing the infrastructure and creating, managing, updating, lifecycle of the cluster. And then they're the developers who actually go and build and deploy the applications. But they work really hand in hand to achieve some of these things like understanding and allocating those costs to keep and drive developer accountability of the spend that their applications are incurring, or even like architecting for the cloud if they're migrating from a traditional IaaS to PaaS or from another cloud to AKS. Making those key considerations of like, what are the right VM SKUs, what are the right ways and best practices to build this application. So yeah, I think it's amazing how much can go into the end-to-end life cycle and how almost modular the framework is. Like there are specific capabilities that may resonate more specifically with an organization or a team that a different team may not even be considering at that stage of their maturity.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the most powerful aspects of the framework is the modularity of it. The intent of FinOps, the FinOps framework, is not to say that, okay, you're not doing FinOps unless you do all of this.
Mm-hmm.
The intent is, hey, here are the things that are important. Now, you need to decide for yourself, for your organization, and maybe even your team within your organization, where are you at within your journey? And what's important to you? Because you can't go do all of these things at one time. Right, it's going to take time, right? And even as you focus on each one of them, you're not necessarily going to go do everything you could possibly ever do, right? So typically, it'll look like most organizations will start with the tooling that's in the cloud. So they usually start with that understand domain because it's about I just need to know what's out there. In fact, when customers come to us within the cost management and FinOps space and say, I need help, usually what happens is they come to us and they say, my costs are well beyond what I expected them to be. I don't understand why they're there, and I need to reduce that. I need to optimize that. Mm-hmm. And they're missing that critical part on business value. That's the most difficult part of it. Because it's about understanding what are you doing with it, not just what's happening in the technology, what's happening in the cloud. But that's usually how that conversation goes. And when you start with the tooling that's in the cloud, you don't really have to worry about data ingestion because all the data is in the cloud and it's just there, right? But you do have to worry about allocation. So you have multiple teams using shared services. How are you going to split that up to make sure that you understand and the teams understand how they're contributing to the cost that's coming in with those shared resources, right? Mm-hmm. And this is where something like the namespaces view in cost analysis comes in, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. That experience is built exactly for this, the allocation, being able to show back and understand what is making up your cluster cost, how much spend is being incurred by a specific application, or how much idle resources are there. So if there's a lot of idle, then that's a great opportunity to go and optimize that infrastructure, those workloads. Yeah. How is allocation and chargeback different? Because those are two common ones that a lot of our customers think are tightly related, but they're not necessarily the same thing, right?
Yeah. And they definitely are tightly related. Actually, allocation actually used to be split out across 3 domains last year. We changed it to merge 2 of them together. So the way that you can actually, was it 3 or was it 4? Anyways, um, there's the way that you can think about it is allocation is kind of that core infrastructure. In chargeback is about let's see, how do we think about this? I think there's 3 core things to think about, 4 core things to think about. There's, I have costs coming in, and I need to know who's responsible for those. That's the core thing that you do with allocation, right? There's another critical piece to that, especially with AKS, which is now I've got shared resources. So how do I manage the shared costs? I have that resource. I know that there's lots of teams that own that stuff. So I need to figure out how do I split that out. And again, that's where that namespace level breakdown, having labels, things like that will help you break that cost down and then say, this is the piece that this team's responsible for. This is the piece that team's responsible for, and so on. So managing shared costs. Once you have that, then you, let's say, whether you have a FinOps team or this is something that you're doing kind of independently as an engineer within the product team, you have an idea of how things are allocated out, but nobody else does. Like the third step is what we call showback. And this is about showing all of the teams across the organization what it is that they're responsible for, right? You're not making them do anything. This is just saying, hey, just so you know, this is the cost that you're incurring. And then chargeback is that final step. And this is kind of the I don't want to say the last mile, but that golden milestone that people want to eventually get to, but it's one of the more complex ones, which is not only am I showing you what you're spending, but you're going to pay for it. And then they do cross-charging across the organization to kind of help facilitate that. And you can see that in a lot of different ways. Sometimes that happens for internal chargeback. Sometimes that's actually billing customers for the services that they're using. And people are trying to figure out, what is my cost coming in for the resources that are being attributed to this specific customer? So that way I know how to bill them. But that's kind of the difference. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I think in the platform engineering model is very applicable where, as you mentioned, like in multi-tenancies, a single cluster could be shared across 4 or 5 different teams. And when you're able to show back to each of those developer teams, they can drive individual optimizations like, having better request and limit value set that align with their actual usage, or platform teams can implement like resource quotas. So each of those applications aren't being resource hungry. One might consume more than another. So I think, being able to show back is a huge step in bringing that visibility, driving some actual action, and then chargeback is like the icing on the cake where that platform team can, run very smoothly and each team is paying for what they're actually using. So it's pretty cool how that ties together.
Yeah, and it's really about that accountability. And the reason why chargeback is split out, you'll see that chargeback is in the bottom. It's part of the manage the FinOps practice domain. It's tied with invoicing because it is really all about that payment of the cost, but it relies on allocation. As a matter of fact, the showback piece used to be more prominent a couple of years ago. We took that word out of the name of the domain, but that's part of reporting and analytics because that's just a core part of what we do, right? When we build the reporting infrastructure, it needs to account for allocation, right? And when you're bringing the stuff into your own system, or build versus buy is very big in this space because every organization has their own unique needs, and that's why data ingestion is so important. Also, allocation is going to rely on different sets of data because sometimes the data out of the cloud isn't even enough to be able to do that allocation the way that you need it to be done. Sometimes you have the same workload that the only way that you could split it out is based on telemetry. So you need to bring in telemetry in order to do that as well. So it really just kind of depends on your solution and how you're building that. But the framework just kind of gives you kind of those building blocks for you to then build on top of. And like I said, each of the capabilities just kind of builds on top of each other.
I love that. And actually, let's jump over to the optimize section too,
Yeah,
because I think that's particularly applicable to AKS customers as well.
yeah,
I'm thinking like rate optimization around RIs and discounts, as well as workload optimization in AKS. We have a lot of options around application and infrastructure scaling, so vertical, horizontal pod auto scaling, CADA,
yeah,
node auto provision, which actually will spin up the most cost-effective VM SKU based on the resource requirements of your pod. So a lot of really interesting stuff here. And how do we think about that from the lens of the framework as well? Can you share a bit about that?
yeah, sure. I'd say one of my favorite things here, which was new last year, is architecting for the cloud, um, because it was something that was kind of missing. We kept looking at optimize as this post deployment activity. The one thing that's nice about this is, as you're bringing workloads to the cloud, it's the intent of this is to say you should stop, look at what you're doing, and make sure that the technology decisions that you're making are the right ones to be made. And I don't want to call it pre-optimization, but it's that chance for you to stop, take a breath, look at what you're doing, and make sure that you're building things out in a way that is going to be optimized before you put it out there. Of course, you're not going to ever cover everything, which is where workload optimization comes in. Um, but rate optimization, specifically looking at that one, this is probably most popular within centralized FinOps teams because they're able to look at what's going on across the organization and see there are lots of teams doing these common things. Uh, there's also some opportunities to identify and implement certain policies to drive consistent usage on certain SKUs. Uh, so that way, and the benefit of that is as you standardize on SKUs across the organization, then you can say, all right, now I have more usage of this one SKU. So now I can get bigger and better discounts for that SKU because you're able to commit to potentially 3, or for some SKUs even support 5 years reservations. And then, of course, you have savings plans for the things that you need a little bit more flexibility. But that's what rate optimization is all about: commitment discounts and negotiated discounts as you renew your agreement and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Licensing and SaaS is also really good. That domain specifically, we can look at that for coverage of things like Azure Hybrid Benefit. If you have existing Windows licenses on-prem that you're not using, then that's an opportunity to leverage those to reduce your total cost. And then, workload optimization is just about looking at what are you doing within the workloads, to make sure that you're using the right SKUs and you're using them efficiently. It's also important to look at, while your organization may have standardized on certain SKUs and there's benefits of that, is that still the most optimal SKU for you?
Mm-hmm.
And there may be times where you decide that you still want to use it regardless of that. But there's a lot of thinking that can kind of go into those sorts of decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely is not a you picked one SKU, that's the right one, we're done. It's definitely an iterative process that needs to be
Yeah,
reevaluated, and same goes for many of the capabilities on this
yeah,
framework too.
yeah,
I think that's the beauty of FinOps, is that it's the iterative process where the where you are at a certain stage may
yeah,
change given on your maturity on AKS or on the cloud as well. So there's always something to be thinking about. There's a lot more that we can jump into on this framework. We could talk about it for hours and hours. But really appreciate, this the sneak peek into the framework. And what are some next steps that customers can take in terms of learning more, documentation, any suggestions that you have?
um, I mean, first thing I would say is utilize the tools that are there. So cost analysis has these, the I keep thinking of them as new, but they've been there for a year. I don't know. But cost analysis has these views for looking at AKS cost. That's going to be your quickest way to get an idea of what's going on, and gives you that quick peek into just understanding your cost. So starting cost analysis. A lot of people in our industry learn by doing. So go do. There's also a lot of guidance. We have a lot of documentation around the FinOps framework, both on our side and in the FinOps Foundation side. Ours just tries to give that Microsoft lens on it to say, here's specifically what you can go do for the Microsoft Cloud. And actually, there's even FinOps Foundation has dedicated training. I'm trying to think. I want to say they might even have some stuff specifically for containers.
Awesome.
But yeah, just take advantage of the resources that are out there. The FinOps Foundation also has a wealth of videos in this space, and container management and optimization is a big part of that. So there's a ton of content that's out there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll drop those in the video notes below. And thank you again for your time. This was a really lovely conversation, and excited to dive into it more in future episodes.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me.